Tonight, we turn toward one of the quietest paradoxes in modern psychology. What does it actually mean to feel alone in a room full of people, when your nervous system was built to feel everything? Science tells a different story than the one most sensitive people have been told about themselves. And that story begins right here, with you, exactly as you are. Welcome to Psychology for Sleep. Wherever you are right now, perhaps with the lights already dimmed, the quiet finally arriving after a long and absorbing day. Allow yourself this particular kind of stillness. We'll move through 100 relaxing facts about sensitive people and loneliness. From the crowded room where no one noticed what you noticed, to the quiet car ride home where relief and sadness arrive together, to the science that finally explains why you felt both. This gentle journey through the science of sensitive minds builds a quiet place for people who have spent a long time not quite fitting in. A soft subscribe, a like, or a whispered share creates a path for other sensitive souls to find this space too, and brings us one step closer to keeping this sanctuary open, one deeply feeling heart at a time. Your being here tonight is already enough. It always has been. Let yourself settle completely here. Feel your jaw unclench, your shoulders release, your breath deepen without effort. You don't need to process anything more tonight. Sense that soothing heaviness arriving now, like a room after the last guest has finally gone. Still, unheld, and for this hour, only yours. Close your eyes and breathe deeply. You're where silence finally holds you. Let your mind ease into depth. And now we begin. There is a name for what you feel. Sensory processing sensitivity is a scientifically recognized temperament trait. First formally described by psychologists Elaine and Arthur Aron in the 1990s. It refers to a nervous system that processes sensory and emotional information more deeply than average. If you have always felt like you notice more, absorb more, and carry more from your daily interactions than the people around you seem to, you may have this trait. Research suggests roughly 20% of the human population carries it. You are not alone. You were never as alone as you felt. The trait is not a flaw in the design, a pattern of heightened environmental sensitivity, pausing to observe before acting, has been identified across many animal species, from fish to birds to primates. Researchers suggest this reflects a long-standing evolutionary strategy. Some individuals in any group attend more carefully to their surroundings. Both the cautious and the bold have survived. Both appear to be needed. What looks like hesitation in the sensitive person is actually a deeper act of attention. Researchers use the acronym D-O-I-S to describe the 4 pillars of high sensitivity. D stands for depth of processing, the tendency to think things through more thoroughly before responding. O is for overstimulation, the experience of becoming drained more quickly in intense environments. E is for emotional responsiveness and empathy, feeling things intensely, including the feelings of others. And S is for sensitivity to subtle stimuli, noticing what others simply don't register. Together, these 4 qualities shape the experience of moving through the world as a highly sensitive person. Highly sensitive people process information differently at the level of the brain. Brain imaging studies have found that when viewing emotional images or social scenes, individuals high in sensory processing sensitivity show greater activation in the insula, a region deeply involved in emotional awareness, internal sensing, and integrating feelings with perception. This heightened insular activity appears consistently across different types of stimuli and is thought to be one reason why sensitive people often feel the emotional weight of a moment long after it has passed for others. The mirror neuron system is more active in highly sensitive people. Mirror neurons fire both when we perform an action and when we observe someone else performing the same action. In sensitive individuals, this system appears to respond more strongly, especially in the presence of loved ones expressing happiness or sadness. What this means in practice is that when someone near a sensitive person is in pain, they do not merely observe that pain, they feel a version of it. This is the neurological foundation of deep empathy and also of deep emotional exhaustion. A large study, published in early 2025, examined loneliness, specifically in highly sensitive people. The researchers studied over 3,000 adults and measured both emotional loneliness, the absence of deeply felt connection, and social loneliness, the absence of social contact. They found that highly sensitive people scored significantly higher on emotional loneliness than the general population. Crucially, they did not differ on social isolation. This means that sensitive people can have the same number of friends, the same social calendar, the same amount of human contact, and still experience a profound inner sense of not being truly known. The loneliness is not about quantity. It was never about quantity. Emotional loneliness and social loneliness are two distinct experiences in the brain. Social loneliness arises from the absence of people. Emotional loneliness arises from the absence of intimacy, from the feeling that no one truly understands you. For highly sensitive people, who often notice what others feel, who listen carefully, who remember details others let slip, the most painful form of loneliness is not being in an empty room. It is being in a full one, giving deeply and receiving only surface in return. The experience of loneliness changes the brain. Neuroscience research shows that chronic feelings of social disconnection alter activity in the prefrontal cortex, the amygdala, and the limbic system, regions involved in emotional regulation, alertness, and social processing. For highly sensitive people, whose brains are already more reactive in these areas, the effect of loneliness is not simply uncomfortable. It registers, at a neurological level, more like a persistent signal of vulnerability. The body quietly braced, the system quietly waiting for something to ease. People who feel lonely show changes in their resting state brain connectivity. Research examining brain rhythms in lonely individuals found altered patterns in regions connected to emotional processing and social perception. Sensitive people, who are already more attuned to social signals, may be especially affected by these shifts. Their nervous systems, already listening harder than others, and now responding to the absence of the connection they were built to seek. So the science is already beginning to answer the central question: feeling alone in a crowd, when you are a sensitive person is not irrational. It is not weakness. It is the predictable result of a nervous system designed to register the depth of experience, including the depth of what is missing. A brain built for real connection experiences the absence of it differently than a brain that never sought that depth to begin with. Highly sensitive people are wired to read emotional subtleties. Research has found they are faster to notice small differences. A slight shift in someone's tone, a fractional change in facial expression, the way a conversation changes direction just before it gets real. In busy social environments, these signals are constantly incoming. The sensitive brain does not get to simply be in a room. It is always reading the room, absorbing it, filing it, weighing it. By the end of an ordinary gathering, that is a tremendous amount of interior work done in complete invisibility. The experience of being highly sensitive can often feel like receiving a radio signal no one else can hear. You pick up the frequency of the tension between two people. You notice that the person smiling was crying an hour ago. You sense the grief underneath the laughter. This is not imagination. Brain imaging confirms that the mirror neuron system in sensitive individuals responds more intensely to emotional displays. Even when those displays are subtle, you are picking up something real. The question that stays with you is why almost no one else seems to hear it. Loneliness, at its neurological root, is a signal, not a verdict. Evolutionary psychologists and neuroscientists have described loneliness as the brain's alert system for social disconnection, analogous to the way hunger signals the need for food. The signal is meant to be temporary, a prompt to seek connection, not a permanent state. But when the connections available do not match the depth that a sensitive nervous system requires, the signal cannot quiet itself. It keeps sounding, even in the presence of other people. The ventral attention network in the brain plays a role in loneliness. This network monitors the environment for socially and emotionally significant signals. Research has found it is more active in people who feel lonely, always scanning, always listening for cues of disconnection. For sensitive people, this system was already set to a higher baseline of vigilance. When loneliness is added to an already watchful nervous system, the inner world becomes very loud indeed. Oxytocin, sometimes called the bonding hormone, plays a role in social trust and connection. Research has linked disrupted oxytocin signaling to altered stress reactivity and a tendency to withdraw socially. For sensitive people, who are more reactive to stress and more affected by the quality of social interactions, the chemistry of connection matters in a particular way. Shallow conversations do not trigger the same sense of ease that genuine intimacy provides. The nervous system of a sensitive person knows the difference, even when the mind tries to be satisfied. There is a pattern researchers have noted in highly sensitive people and social interaction. When relationships are safe and deep, sensitive individuals thrive. Their emotional depth becomes an asset. Their noticing becomes a gift. Their presence becomes something others seek out. When relationships remain surface level, the same sensitivity becomes a source of exhaustion. The same nervous system that allows for profound connection also makes the absence of it more viscerally felt. High sensitivity amplifies both directions. Research using the model of differential susceptibility. Sometimes called the orchid and dandelion theory, shows that sensitive individuals are more affected by their environments in both positive and negative directions. Dandelions grow almost anywhere. Orchids, in the right conditions, produce something extraordinary. In harsh or indifferent conditions, they suffer more visibly. Highly sensitive people are not weaker than others. They are more responsive to everything, including the warmth or coldness of the social world around them. The deep processing that characterizes high sensitivity means that sensitive people tend to think about conversations long after they have ended. They replay what was said. They consider what was not said. They wonder what was meant. This is not rumination in the clinical sense. It is the nervous system completing its job. The brain of a sensitive person files social information more thoroughly than average. The cost is that the filing takes time and happens in the quiet and often in the hours meant for sleep. Highly sensitive people often describe a particular kind of exhaustion after social events. Not the pleasant tiredness of a good day, but a drained, overstimulated state that takes hours or sometimes a full day to clear. This is because their nervous systems have been working at a significantly higher level of processing the entire time they were in company. Every expression noticed, every emotional current registered, every nuance absorbed. All of it adds weight. Coming home to quiet is not antisocial. It is necessary. It is the body asking for what it needs to function. The relationship between sensory processing sensitivity and creativity is worth noting. Sensitive people tend to score higher on aesthetic sensitivity, noticing beauty, being moved by art, music, and nature more readily than others. This same depth of processing that creates emotional pain in disconnected social environments creates profound beauty when applied to the arts, to nature, to language. The nervous system that suffers most in shallow environments is also the one most capable of experiencing deep wonder. These two facts are inseparable. The default mode network, the brain's system for daydreaming, self-reflection, and imagining others' inner lives, is associated with loneliness in a specific way. Lonely people show increased activity in this network, suggesting they spend more time in inward reflection, imagining social connection, replaying past interactions. For sensitive people who already have a rich inner world, this tendency can compound. The inner life becomes the place where real connection exists. More vivid, more understood, more safe than the connections available outside. Highly sensitive people tend to notice the gap between what people say and what they mean. This perceptual accuracy, picking up incongruence between words and tone, between a smile and the eyes above it, can feel like a burden when it reveals that a conversation is not genuine. For a sensitive person, pretending not to notice requires effort. Staying engaged in surface interaction while perceiving the deeper layer underneath is like reading two texts simultaneously, neither of which is the one you came looking for. Research has found that for highly sensitive people, even positive events can be exhausting if they involve a great deal of stimulation. A birthday party where you are loved, a work celebration where you are recognized, a family gathering full of warmth. All of these can leave the sensitive person depleted, not because the love was not real, but because the nervous system processed every element of it at full depth and now needs time to settle. This is frequently misunderstood, both by others and by sensitive people themselves. The relationship between high sensitivity and sleep difficulty is now well documented. A study published in 2024 found that sleep reactivity, the tendency for stress to directly disrupt sleep onset and quality, fully mediates the relationship between sensory processing, sensitivity, and insomnia symptoms. In plain language, sensitive people do not simply have bad sleep. They carry the weight of their days directly into the night. What happened at 6 in the evening is still active at midnight. The nervous system, still processing, still filing, does not know it is allowed to stop. And so the picture is already emerging. The sensitive person sitting in a crowded room is not suffering from social anxiety, not being dramatic, not choosing to be difficult. They are experiencing the predictable result of a nervous system tuned to a different frequency than the world generally broadcasts on. They feel the distance between surface and depth as a physical sensation. They carry that distance home, and in the hours when rest should finally come, they are still listening for something that sounds like being truly known. Let's pause here and notice your body. Right now, your brain is sorting today, deciding what matters, what can be released. You don't need to do anything. It knows how. Every cell in you is contributing to a quiet process of settling, processing the day, releasing what doesn't need to be held, preparing for rest. Notice the weight of your body against whatever surface holds you. That weight is real. This moment is real. You are allowed to be exactly this still. Now we continue. The loneliness that sensitive people feel is described in research as primarily emotional loneliness, distinct from social loneliness. Emotional loneliness is the experience of lacking intimacy, close relationships where one is truly understood, where vulnerability is safe, where depth is welcome. Sensitive people can have full address books, busy weekends, and warm acquaintances, and still experience profound emotional loneliness. Because what they need is not more contact, it is more depth. Neuroscience has found that loneliness correlates with changes in the brain's default network, the system involved in mentalizing, imagining others' minds, and reflecting on the self. Lonely individuals often show increased activity in this network, but decreased integration with other brain systems. For sensitive people, this means the inner world expands as a kind of compensation, a rich interior landscape, filling in for the genuine connection the brain and nervous system are still seeking. The experience of being misunderstood is a particular kind of pain for sensitive people, because they invest so much in understanding others, noticing feelings, reading situations with care, adjusting how they speak to be truly heard. The absence of that care in return lands harder. The same nervous system that gives so much attentiveness to others is the one that registers with precision when it is not being received. Sensitive people often describe feeling most themselves in one-on-one conversations. The depth they seek is most possible when stimulation is lower and connection is direct. In group settings, the signals are too many and too varied. The meaningful conversation keeps not happening, kept at bay by noise and numbers. So the sensitive person smiles and participates and notices the loneliness beneath their own smile. One of the quieter, stranger experiences this temperament produces. There is evidence that the amygdala, the brain's alarm center, is more easily activated in highly sensitive people. The amygdala processes emotional salience and signals the body to respond. For sensitive individuals, this threshold is lower. Less stimulation is needed to engage it. In social situations, this means the brain is often operating in a state of heightened alertness, not fear, but readiness. The body is braced, and readiness is not the same as rest. Loneliness has measurable effects on the immune system. Research has linked the experience of perceived social isolation to elevated markers of inflammation in the body. The same low-level biological response that accompanies prolonged stress. For sensitive people, this process is not abstract. It accumulates slowly in the quiet gap between the connection that is needed and the connection that is available. Sensitive people tend to need what researchers sometimes call high-quality social interaction. Conversation that moves below the surface, that includes emotional honesty, that allows for silence without discomfort. In environments where these qualities are absent, sensitive individuals often perform a kind of social mimicry, saying the expected things, laughing at the right moments, appearing engaged. This performance is exhausting. In a particular way, it requires being present in two places simultaneously, neither of which is where they actually want to be. The trait of high sensitivity is distributed across cultures and appears in all major personality research frameworks. Studies have found it in East Asian populations, European populations, North and South American populations. While cultural context shapes how the trait is expressed and how it is valued, the underlying neurobiology appears to be consistent across human groups. Roughly 1 in 5 people, regardless of where they were born, carry this deeper calibration of the nervous system. For highly sensitive people, the quality of rest depends significantly on the quality of connection. This is not sentimental, it is neurological. Chronic emotional loneliness activates the same biological stress systems as prolonged difficulty. When that stress is unresolved at the end of the day, sleep is harder to reach. The nervous system that has been watching and absorbing all day has not been given the signal that it is safe to stop. Sensitive people often gravitate toward music, literature, film, and nature as sources of what might be called vicarious connection. These mediums offer something that ordinary social interaction sometimes cannot: depth, honesty, emotional specificity. A piece of music that articulates something the sensitive person has never found the words for. A character in a novel who experiences the world in a way that feels exactly right. These encounters are not substitutes for human connection, but they are proof that what the sensitive person is seeking is real. Someone else made it. Research has found that loneliness is inversely related to meaning in life, not just as an idea, but in terms of overlapping neural patterns. The more connected a person feels, the more coherent their sense of meaning tends to be. The more isolated, the more fragmented. For sensitive people, who often experience meaning deeply through connection, through the moment of being truly understood, the absence of that connection is not only lonely, it is a kind of dimming of purpose. Sensitive people frequently report that childhood was a time of particular confusion. The world was intense. Reactions that seemed disproportionate to those around them were perfectly proportional from the inside. Many sensitive people grew up being told they were too much, too emotional, too serious, too sensitive. These experiences do not simply pass. They become part of how the sensitive person understands themselves in social situations. The loneliness of not being understood can begin very early, and the body holds it long after the mind moves on. The nervous system of a highly sensitive person is particularly affected by the environment in which early attachment develops. Research consistently shows that sensitive individuals are more affected by the quality of parenting and early caregiving, for better and for worse, in warm, attuned environments. Sensitivity becomes a gift. In colder or more chaotic environments, the same trait creates deeper vulnerability. This is not determinism. It is context, and it helps explain why so many sensitive adults carry within them both great capacity and great tenderness toward their own younger selves. The D-O-B-E-S model captures something important about the experience of loneliness for sensitive people. Each of its 4 dimensions contributes to the specific quality of that loneliness. The depth of processing means the sensitive person thinks about what was missed long after others have moved on. The overstimulation means the crowded party is too loud for any real signal to arrive. The emotional responsiveness means the lack of connection is felt, not merely observed. And the sensitivity to subtleties means they notice exactly when and how the conversation stayed shallow. Halfway to our first answer, the evidence is gathering. The emotional loneliness of the highly sensitive person is not a misperception or an overreaction. It is the accurate reading of a gap between the depth of connection the nervous system was built for and the depth of connection that ordinary social life typically offers. This gap is real, and naming it, as science is slowly beginning to do, is the beginning of the only real relief. You're still here, still listening, still somewhere between thinking and resting. Take one slow breath. Your mind is doing exactly what it was built to do tonight, turning things over gently in the quiet, finding the words for what you've always known. We'll keep going together, gently. The relationship between high sensitivity and sleep disruption follows a specific pathway. Sensitive people carry stress into sleep more readily than others, not because they are worriers, but because their nervous systems process social and emotional information more thoroughly. And that processing does not simply stop when the lights go off. A conversation from the afternoon is still being filed. A look that did not quite feel right is still being considered. The body does not know these are finished. It waits. Sleep researchers describe a concept called sleep reactivity, the degree to which stress disrupts a person's ability to fall and stay asleep. Highly sensitive people show higher sleep reactivity than the general population. This means that on a difficult day, or even a merely full one, the likelihood of troubled sleep increases significantly. The nervous system that absorbed more during the day has more to settle before it can rest. This is not a character flaw. It is physiology. Sensitive people often report that the quality of a social interaction in the evening has a direct effect on how well they sleep that night. A conversation that felt genuine, that involved real listening, that allowed for authentic expression. This settles the nervous system in a way that shallow or tense interaction does not. The body registers the difference. When real connection has occurred, something in the system releases. When it has not, the system continues waiting for the signal that it is safe to stop. The body's stress response and its sleep systems are deeply intertwined. Cortisol, the primary stress hormone, rises in response to perceived difficulty, including the experience of social disconnection. For sensitive people, whose systems register social difficulty more readily, even mild feelings of being unseen or unheard can maintain cortisol at levels that interfere with sleep onset. This is one reason why the suggestion to simply not worry before bed often fails for sensitive people. The worry is not the cause. The nervous system's unfinished processing is. Mindfulness-based approaches and cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia have both shown particular benefit for highly sensitive people with sleep difficulties. These approaches work not by suppressing the sensitive person's nature, but by providing tools to complete the nervous system's processing before bed, to give the brain permission to finish and release what it has been holding. The practice of consciously reviewing the day, naming what was felt, and then consciously setting it down, mirrors what the nervous system is trying to do on its own. Highly sensitive people often find it easier to sleep after meaningful social connection than after social performance. A quiet dinner with someone who asks real questions. A phone call with a friend who listens closely. These are not luxuries for the sensitive person. They are, in the most literal neurological sense, the conditions under which the body can finally rest. When connection meets the nervous system at its actual depth, something unwinds that would otherwise stay taut until morning. There is a particular quality of loneliness that arrives in the middle of the night for many sensitive people. It is not the daytime loneliness of not being understood. It is quieter and stranger than that. It is the loneliness of lying in the dark, more awake than the world, processing things that have no audience. The sensitive person at 2 in the morning is often still working, still turning over the day, still listening for something that never quite arrived. Understanding this is not the same as curing it, but it is the beginning of being kinder to oneself about it. The concept of social homeostasis, the brain's system for maintaining a balance of social connection, is disrupted by loneliness in measurable ways. In animal studies, social isolation alters gene expression in brain regions involved in social decision-making, including the prefrontal cortex and amygdala. While the mechanisms in humans are more complex, the principle holds. The brain is designed for a certain level of connection, and when that level falls below what it needs, it reorganizes around the deficit. For sensitive people who need deeper connection rather than simply more of it, social homeostasis is a more specific condition to maintain. Sensitive people often find particular comfort in solitude that is chosen This is distinct from loneliness, which is unchosen. The silence of a room where one is alone by preference is restorative. The silence of a room full of people where one feels invisible is depleting. The same quiet, entirely different meanings. This distinction matters enormously to the sensitive person, who may be assumed by others to be simply introverted, when what they are actually doing is navigating a very specific relationship between the depth they need and the world that is available. We are at the midpoint now. The science has been building towards something. Sensitive people feel lonelier in crowds, not because they are broken, not because they expect too much, and not because the world has failed them. They feel lonelier because they are operating with a nervous system calibrated for depth. And most of what the social world offers is surface. The loneliness is the accurate reading of a real distance. And understanding that changes everything about how a sensitive person might begin to meet their own needs. As you breathe slowly now, consider this. Every memory you carry was shaped by the particular depth with which you felt it. The moments that stayed, they stayed because you were present enough to really receive them. Your nervous system is not a liability. It is the very instrument through which meaning arrives. Right now, your body is doing something quiet and steady. It is learning, slowly, that this moment is safe, that the depth it carries does not need to be defended tonight. Let that learning continue. And we go on. The loneliness researchers measure in highly sensitive people is specifically emotional loneliness. The absence of intimate understanding, not the absence of social contact. This distinction is not a minor technical point. It reframes the entire conversation about what sensitive people need. Support that focuses on increasing social activity, on getting out more, on building a bigger network, may miss the point entirely. The network already exists. What is needed is depth within it. Sensitive people are often drawn into the role of the one who listens. They are the friend who asks the careful question, who remembers what was said 3 months ago, who notices when something is wrong before anyone says it aloud. This role carries real meaning. It also carries a quiet cost, the asymmetry of deeply knowing others, while remaining only partially known in return. The loneliness of the sensitive listener is particular. It is the loneliness of a great giver who rarely receives in kind. Brain imaging studies show that loneliness is associated with decreased activity in regions involved in interpersonal trust. The parts of the brain that allow us to open toward others, to accept their care, to believe in the safety of connection. For sensitive people who have experienced their depth as a burden to others, or who have been told they are too much, this guardedness can become a self-protective habit. The very thing they need, closeness, becomes harder to reach precisely because they have learned, through experience, to be careful with it. There is a meaningful difference between social loneliness and emotional loneliness in terms of how they feel inside the body. Social loneliness tends to feel like emptiness, the absence of anyone. Emotional loneliness tends to feel like a kind of ache, the presence of everyone, and still something missing. Sensitive people are more likely to experience the second kind, the ache beneath the smile, the distance that persists in company, the particular exhaustion of being surrounded and still. Somehow, alone. Sensitive people often describe a sense of relief when they meet someone who understands, not someone who tolerates their depth, someone who shares it. These encounters can be rare and, when they happen, disproportionately meaningful. A conversation that goes below the surface. A person who asks a real question and waits for a real answer. A friendship where both people notice the things that others miss. These moments are not small to the sensitive person. They are, on some level, the thing that makes everything else sustainable. Research on differential susceptibility shows that sensitive people benefit more from supportive relationships than non-sensitive people do. This is a meaningful finding. It means the same amplification that makes sensitive people more affected by disconnection also makes them more affected by genuine care. Warmth lands more deeply. Understanding is more restorative. The depth of the deficit and the depth of the healing are both greater. The same trait, working in both directions. The anterior insula, the brain region most consistently activated in highly sensitive people when they process emotional information, is also involved in the experience of physical pain. Research on empathy has long noted that this region activates when we witness others in pain, not only when we are in pain ourselves. For sensitive people, whose insular activation is stronger and more consistent, the pain of those around them is not merely observed. It is, to some neurological degree, shared. Being in the presence of suffering without the ability to help is particularly wearing for a sensitive person. Sensitive people tend to process conversations at multiple levels simultaneously. They are following the words. They are reading the emotional undercurrent. They are considering what is not being said. They are noticing how the other person shifts in their chair. All of this happens automatically, without effort, below the threshold of conscious choice. By the time a social gathering ends, the sensitive person has been in 4 or 5 conversations at once, only one of which was audible. No wonder the drive home feels quiet in both directions. The nervous system of a sensitive person responds more strongly to environmental cues across all sensory channels: sound, light, temperature, texture, emotional atmosphere. All arrive more vividly in a crowded social space. Every one of these channels is active at once. The sensitive person is not simply attending a party. They are receiving the party at a higher resolution than everyone else in the room. And in that higher resolution, the emotional distances between people are visible in a way they are not to others. Sleep offers the sensitive person something social interaction rarely does: solitude that is both necessary and guiltless. The hours of sleep are perhaps the only hours when the sensitive nervous system is allowed to stop receiving, when the processing that has been happening all day can finally move into its natural completion. This is part of why sleep matters so particularly to sensitive people. It is not merely rest. It is the only true off switch. And when it is taken away, even briefly, the cost accumulates quickly. The relationship between sensitivity and meaning-making is worth staying with. Research suggests that lonelier individuals show brain connectivity patterns that are inversely related to those associated with meaning in life. The more isolated a person feels, the less coherent their sense of purpose tends to be at a neural level. For sensitive people, who often find meaning through connection, through the moment of recognizing another person and being recognized in return, sustained loneliness is not just uncomfortable. It quietly dims the sense that the depth they carry has somewhere to go. Sensitive people are often particularly skilled at making others feel understood. They ask the questions that open conversations. They listen with their whole attention. They create the conditions for depth, and others thrive in those conditions, whether or not they know who created them. Over time, the sensitive person who gives this way may begin to notice something quietly painful. The depth they offer does not always come back, and in the absence of return, even the most generous giver begins to wonder, in their quietest moments, whether their depth has value to anyone at all. Researchers describe sensitive people as being more influenced by their environments than others, more shaped by positive conditions and more affected by difficult ones. This means that the conditions in which a sensitive person spends their evenings, who they are with, what was said, how the conversation felt, matter more than they might for someone with a less reactive nervous system. The quality of a sensitive person's environment is not a preference. It is a matter of genuine well-being. The concept of solitude as restoration, rather than isolation, is important to the sensitive person's well-being. Research on high sensitivity suggests that chosen alone time allows the nervous system to process, integrate, and release what it has absorbed. This is not retreating from the world. It is the necessary maintenance that allows the sensitive person to return to the world without being depleted by it. Understanding this, truly understanding it, not merely accepting it as an apology, changes the relationship to solitude entirely. We now understand something more clearly. The answer to the central question, why sensitive people feel alone in crowds, is not one answer. It is a system. A nervous system built for depth receives surface and registers the gap. A brain built for deep exchange absorbs the emotional weight of everyone in the room, but finds no one exchanging at the same level. A body that carries the day into the night lies awake in the quiet, still processing what the room was actually feeling. This is not a problem with the sensitive person. It is the consequence of a particular and real kind of intelligence. The concept of being a highly sensitive person is not a clinical diagnosis. It is a description of a temperament, a way of being in the world that is neither disorder nor disorder's absence, but something more specific than either. Elaine Aron, who first named and researched this trait, emphasized that it is not a weakness to be overcome, but a characteristic to be understood. The research has consistently supported this framing. High sensitivity is associated with both greater difficulty in harsh environments and greater flourishing in supportive ones. The social calibration of a sensitive person is set to a higher resolution. This is the phrase that perhaps most accurately describes the experience. Not that sensitive people feel more, though sometimes they do, but that they register more of what is actually happening, more of what is being held back, more of the gap between what someone says and what they mean. Living at that resolution requires more processing, more rest, more of the particular conditions that make the nervous system feel safe enough to release what it has absorbed. For some sensitive people, the experience of being in a large group is not merely draining. it can feel actively distressing. Too many signals arriving simultaneously, each one carrying emotional weight, none of them belonging to a conversation that reaches the necessary depth. The resulting state is sometimes described as feeling more alone than when physically alone. Because alone, the sensitive person can rest. In the crowd, they are working constantly and receiving nothing that matches what they are giving. Research on the neuroscience of meaning in life suggests that loneliness and meaning are stored in overlapping brain networks, and that patterns of brain connectivity representing loneliness are inversely related to those representing purpose and connection. For sensitive people, who experience meaning most vividly through genuine human contact, sustained emotional loneliness is not merely sad. It quietly erodes the sense that the depth they carry has somewhere to go, that it matters to anyone. This is the most tender form of the experience. Sensitive people often report their richest sense of connection through things that carry depth. Music that names what language cannot. A landscape that opens something in the chest. A book that makes one feel completely understood. These are not second-best substitutes for human connection. They are evidence that what the sensitive person is seeking exists. The depth is real. Others have found it. Someone made it and left it behind. These encounters are proof that the search was never irrational, and that the loneliness in the crowd was never the whole story. The particular tiredness of the sensitive person after a day in the world is worth naming carefully. It is not the muscle tiredness of physical work. It is something more interior, a deep saturation, as though every surface inside has been filled to capacity. This is the result of processing everything at full depth, of allowing nothing to pass unregistered, of giving the emotional world the same kind of thorough attention that other people give to explicit and obvious things. It is a tiredness, born of doing something most people do not know is being done. Sensitive people who have found language for what they experience, who understand the neuroscience, who have learned that their depth is not a problem, often describe a significant reduction in the secondary suffering that used to accompany the loneliness. The loneliness itself does not disappear, but the shame around it quiets. And the shame, for many sensitive people, was the heaviest part. The loneliness is one layer. The belief that the loneliness means something is wrong with you. That is another layer entirely. Science is slowly removing the second one. The conditions that allow a sensitive person to sleep deeply are, in some ways, the same conditions that allow them to feel connected during the day. Safety, quiet, the sense of not needing to perform, the absence of stimulation that exceeds what the system can process gracefully. When these conditions are present in the social world, in a relationship, a friendship, a space where depth is welcome, the sensitive person does not merely feel better, they feel like themselves. And when they finally reach sleep from that place, the night is a different quality of rest. There is a pattern that some researchers call high sensitivity's paradox. The trait that creates the loneliness also creates the greatest capacity to resolve it. The same nervous system that registers the gap between surface and depth also generates the empathy, the noticing, the careful listening that genuine connection requires. The highly sensitive person is, simultaneously, the person who suffers most from shallow connection, and the person most capable of creating the conditions for deep connection. This is not irony. It is the precise shape of what being highly sensitive means. The question has been answered, at least in its first form. Sensitive people feel lonely in crowds because they are experiencing something real, the gap between a nervous system built for depth and a social world that operates mostly at the surface. The loneliness is not a misread. It is accurate information. And accurate information is not a sentence. It is the beginning of the only kind of self-understanding that leads somewhere softer, quieter, and more genuinely at rest. You might be feeling tired now. That's perfectly fine. A tree does not resist winter. It releases its leaves. It contracts. It waits, not giving up, but trusting the season. This is something like that moment. The moment to let the weight of understanding settle without needing to carry it further tonight. You have processed enough. Your nervous system has done enough. There is nothing left to tend tonight. The quiet is already here. You only need to enter it. We continue. As gently now. Rest is not the absence of sensitivity. It is what sensitivity needs most. The nervous system that absorbs everything requires more deliberate recovery than one that absorbs less. This is not weakness. It is proportion. Deeper wells take longer to refill. For the sensitive person, nighttime is often the first moment of the day that belongs only to them. Not what was said, not what was felt on behalf of others. Just the room, just the breath, just the quiet that does not ask for anything in return. The experience of feeling fully seen is, for a sensitive person, physically calming. Brain research on social safety suggests that genuine understanding, being known without performance, without editing, activates the same neural pathways that reduce stress and lower the body's alarm response. To be truly known is, in the most literal sense, a form of medicine. Sensitive people often find particular comfort in consistency. Routines at night, the same sounds, the same sequence of quiet. The nervous system spent the day in a high state of responsiveness. The evening becomes more restorative when it is predictable. Predictability signals safety. And safety is the condition under which a sensitive nervous system can finally release. Research shows that sensitive people are more affected by their environment than others. In both directions, difficult conditions hurt more, but warmth heals more too. This means that when the right conditions are found, the right relationships, the right spaces, the right amount of understood solitude, the sensitive person does not merely cope, they flourish, more than others do, in the same conditions. Nature has a particular effect on the sensitive nervous system. Forests, water, open sky, the sound of wind through leaves. These environments tend to lower the processing load without lowering the depth of experience. The sensitive person in nature is still noticing everything, but what they are noticing is not emotionally demanding. The world breathes slowly, and the nervous system, for a little while, breathes with it. The depth of feeling that makes social life hard for sensitive people is the same depth that has always driven the most honest human expression. The artists, writers, and musicians who made work that reached below the surface. Many of them described their sensitivity not as the obstacle, but as the source. The loneliness of not belonging in the room was also the loneliness that made the work true. These two things are made of the same substance, and both are worth something. Sleep is one of the few places where the sensitive person is not required to give. The body does its own work. The brain consolidates what it needs. The system repairs what was worn. There is nothing to understand, nothing to read, nothing to navigate. This is part of why sleep, when it comes fully, is so restorative for sensitive people. It is the only place the nervous system is allowed to receive without filtering. Sensitive people often describe a feeling of relief when they encounter language that names their experience. A book, qu'à conversation, a single sentence that describes exactly what it is like to be them. This relief is not trivial. It is neurological. Recognition, being accurately named, reduces the body's quiet vigilance. The brain relaxes when the world makes sense. And for sensitive people, who have often felt unseen by the categories the world provides, being named correctly is a form of rest. The particular loneliness of the sensitive person in a crowd tends to ease when one genuine conversation begins, not a long one. Necessarily, not one that covers everything, but one where both people are actually present, where a real question is asked and a real answer is given, where the depth, however briefly, matches. This is the thing that makes everything else possible. One real conversation, one true moment of being met. Sensitive people who stop apologizing for needing quiet often sleep better, not because they have changed, because the shame has lifted. And shame was the heaviest part. The loneliness is one layer. The belief that something is wrong with you, that is another. Releasing the second one changes the quality of the night. The answer to the central question is becoming something one can rest in. Sensitive people feel lonely in crowds not because they are broken, but because they are built for something the crowd rarely provides. They feel the gap because the gap is real, and feeling a real thing, accurately, even when it aches, is a form of integrity, a form of being true to what one actually is. Research on sleep in sensitive people suggests that compassion toward oneself about sleep difficulties, not fighting the wakefulness, not judging the restlessness, leads to better outcomes than anxious effort. The nervous system cannot be forced to rest. It can only be given conditions in which rest becomes possible. Gentleness is one of those conditions. There is something that happens in the quiet hours of the night for a sensitive person who has stopped fighting what they are. The processing continues. It always will, but it becomes less urgent. The day's events settle into their places. The faces from the room become just memories, fading gently. The ache of not being fully known softens into something more patient, not resolved, but resting. So could sensitivity explain the loneliness of a crowd? Science says yes. Not as a disorder to treat, but as the predictable experience of a particular kind of nervous system in a world not calibrated for its depth. The emotional loneliness is real. The exhaustion is real. And so is the possibility that, in the right conditions, Both lift. Sleep for a sensitive person is most restorative when it follows a day that included at least one moment of genuine connection, not a long day of perfect socializing. A single real moment. One conversation that went below the surface. One exchange where both people arrived honestly. This is not a high bar, but it is a specific one, and knowing it exists makes it possible to look for it. The sensitive nervous system is not always a difficult thing to carry. In the right environment, it is a gift. The capacity to notice more, to feel more, to understand what is unsaid, to be moved by what others pass without seeing, to love with more attention to detail. These are not small things. They are, in fact, the things that make ordinary life feel worth the difficulty of living it. Sensitive people who find their people, who discover relationships where depth is the default, where quiet is understood, where the full complexity of their inner world is welcome, often describe a kind of homecoming, a sense of finally being in the right frequency. The loneliness does not vanish, but it becomes occasional rather than constant, situational rather than existential. And that difference is enormous. The body of a sensitive person, in deep rest, is settling something more than fatigue. It is settling the day's register, all that was absorbed, all that was carried, all that was noticed and held. Sleep is where the filing is completed, where the emotional weight is processed and sorted, where the nervous system, quietly and without any help from the conscious mind, does the work it needs to do to be ready for another day of full attention. The sensitive person in the dark tonight is not failing to rest. They are resting the only way their nervous system knows how. Fully, completely, without apology. The same depth that made the day complex makes the night necessary, and the night, when it opens, offers what the crowd could not: quiet, completion, being held without needing to feel anything at all. To be sensitive is not to be fragile. The orchid is not fragile. It is specific. It requires particular conditions. And in those conditions, it produces something that no other plant does. The sensitive person, given what their system actually needs: genuine rest, chosen quiet, moments of true connection, is capable of a depth of experience and a quality of presence that is irreplaceable, not despite the sensitivity. Because of it, the loneliness in the crowd will still sometimes come. Knowing why it comes does not make it disappear, but it changes the relationship to it. When the sensitive person understands the loneliness as information, as the accurate reading of a gap between what they need and what is available, they can begin to respond to it differently, not with shame, with kindness, and the specific action of finding what is actually needed. Rest, for the sensitive person, is itself a form of connection. Connection with the body that has been working all day. Connection with the quiet self that exists beneath the performance. Connection with the process of settling, releasing, returning to the baseline of one's own feeling. Sleep is not an escape from sensitivity. It is where sensitivity finally gets to be with itself, without an audience. The science of high sensitivity is still growing. Each year, New research refines the picture of the brain, of the loneliness, of the conditions that help sensitive people thrive. What is already clear is this sensitivity is a real thing, a measurable thing, a thing with neural correlates and evolutionary history, and its own particular relationship to rest and connection. It is not too much. It was never too much. It was always just this. And this is exactly enough. You are not broken by your sensitivity. You are calibrated for a depth of connection that the world rarely offers at scale. And recognizing that, truly recognizing it, here, in the quiet, in the dark, is the beginning of the only rest that truly restores. Not the rest of suppression, the rest of understanding, the rest of being, finally, in the right frequency with what you actually are. And so our quiet journey through the science of sensitive minds comes gently to a close. We began at the research published in early 2025, which confirmed that highly sensitive people experience significantly greater emotional loneliness than others, even when their social contacts are exactly the same. We arrived at the place where the loneliness reveals itself not as a flaw, but as the accurate signal of a nervous system built for depth, still searching for what it was designed to find. From the crowded room where no one noticed what was noticed, to the quiet drive home, to the dark that finally asks nothing, we have traced something real, a specific and human kind of aloneness, and the science that finally names it with care. Sensitivity reminds us that the same forces that make a life difficult can be the ones that make it luminous. Much of the depth that sensitive people carry happens in silence, in the reading of a room, in the feeling of what is unspoken, in the hours spent processing what others simply release. It reveals a capacity for connection so precise that ordinary contact cannot always meet it. Without that particular calibration, so much of what makes life tender would simply go unnoticed. By resting here tonight, in the quiet, we honor what it costs to feel that much. In these final minutes, take the deepest breath you can. Think about what it means to carry something real, the depth that sensitive people carry, not as a weight to put down, but as the very substance of what makes connection possible. You are not alone in this. Every person who has ever felt too much in a room, or cried at music no one else seemed to hear, or driven home in relief and sadness at exactly the same moment, they are part of the same quiet frequency. Let your entire being dissolve into the quiet that your particular kind of mind has been searching for all day. Prepare for deep sleep. No boundaries left. Only peace. A gentle share tonight could guide someone else home from a party they didn't quite belong in. Someone driving in the quiet right now, wondering why the evening felt lonely even though everyone was kind. This science has a name for what they carry. Perhaps it will reach them. The processing your nervous system has done today is still unfolding right now. Without your effort, without your witness, you don't need to hold any of this. It was never yours to carry alone. You've traveled inward tonight, through corridors most people never pause to notice. You touched something true about the way you move through the world and found it more understandable, more forgiving, more reasonable than it seemed when the day began. You can allow these thoughts of sensitivity and loneliness to fade now. like the moment between waking and sleep, where thought becomes image, where one thing becomes another without a border, leaving only the soft, dark calm behind. Let your breathing deepen. Let your body feel heavier now, as if invisible hands are gathering the weight of this day, and simply setting it down. If sleep comes, let it carry you the way understanding carries. Not with force, not with urgency, but with the quiet arrival of something that was always on its way, into a realm where time and weight no longer matter. If your eyes are still open, the next video is waiting for you, ready to continue the journey. But if they're closed, stay there. Stay in the darkness that feels safe and warm. Tomorrow, your sensitivity will still be there, still noticing, still reaching, still becoming. But tonight belongs to stillness. Rest well, sleepy soul, and remember, you are always enough. Good night.